92% of the genes that are going to have an effect on you aren't yours or mine. They're actually our microbiome.
You've got to get your body out of its complacency. You've got to trigger those defenses, those longevity genes.
Right now, you're about to hear from 10 of the world's leading experts in longevity, in domains ranging from fitness to nutrition to cognitive performance and more. So let's hear from our first expert right now.
Yeah, interestingly enough, 11 years ago, I wrote my first book called Dr. Gundry's Diet Evolution. And the subtitle was Turn Off the Genes That Are Killing You. And back in those days, we didn't know really anything about the microbiome, the bugs that live in us and on us. And I thought that it was actually our human genes that were controlling our fate. Fast forward for this book, and the reason that book was called Dr. Gundry's Diet Evolution is because my thoughts have evolved. And quite frankly, if you're spouting the same thing you said 10 years ago, I probably don't want to listen to you because
it's probably broken.
Guess what? Time marches on and research marches on. So the fascinating thing is that our genes really have very little to do with what's going to happen to us. Huge NIH study recently published that you're aware of showed that of everything that's going to happen to us in longevity, in diseases, our genes have only about 8% effect on what's going to happen to you and me. So that means 92% of the genes that are going to have an effect on you aren't yours or mine. They're actually our microbiome. So we have trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of bacteria, viruses, worms, protozoa in us and on us. And even though they have fewer genes per little bacteria than you and me, because there's so many of them, the microbiome actually has well over 260 times more genetic material than you and me. And what's really cool, I learned this from a professor of microbiology in Paris a few years ago. And he thought, and I actually subscribe to his theory, that because this huge resource of, if you will, computing power of genetic material that lives in our microbiome, that reproduces constantly, he believed, and I back him up, that we uploaded most of our information processing, just like we upload our information processing to the cloud, we uploaded or downloaded to our bacterial cloud because they've got more computing power. And it sounds kind of far out there, do. But I think he's right, because we now know that the bacteria within us actually control our fate. And it's really hard for a smart person to say, oh, come on now, these little one-cell organisms are going to control me. But in fact, it's actually true, because this is their home. And I like to tell people and get people to understand that we're basically a condominium for bugs. And this is their home. And they're actually living in us at our request. And if we keep their home good, they'll keep us well. Because, quite frankly, if we're doing well, they'll have a great home the rest of their lives. And we'll probably get into this, but the amazing thing is you can take people who are 105 years old, very much like Edith Murray, and who are doing well, and look at their microbiome, which has been done, and compare that to the microbiome of 30-year-olds. And the 30-year-olds who are doing well will have the same microbiome as the 105-year-olds that are doing well. And it turns out most people, if they get to that age, have to have a youthful microbiome, or they're never going to get there.
So fascinating.
So think about your DNA like yarn. That's like a big string, a big lump, a big pile of yarn. You're gonna wind that yarn up, right? So you wind it around something, and that's really what our chromosomes are. Our DNA is wound up into these X's and Y's that are packed inside our cells. That's really our genome packed into chromosomes. And at the very end, you can imagine if you're winding up a ball of yarn, you got to be able to get that yarn so it doesn't unravel to stick. And so you got to put a cap on it. The cap is the telomere. Physically, it kind of looks like the plastic tip on the end of a shoelace, kind of protects it and holds the thing to prevent it from unraveling. That protective cap on our DNA is part of our protection. Longer the telomere, longer we think we're going to live. Cellular aging. Shorter the telomere, the shorter these cells are going to live. And so one of the big areas of research right now, by the way, this research led to the Nobel Prize a few years ago, is what can we actually do to lengthen our telomere? So for those people that are, sort of the Ponce de Leon people looking for the fountain of youth, everybody's looking for things that actually keep our telomeres longer. Well, the answers are from research that I write about in my book might actually be already in our kitchens. So for example, coffee turns out to be a beverage that actually can not just prevent our telomeres from burning down like a fuse, it actually can lengthen the telomeres as well. So that's really quite an amazing thing that coffee can actually do that. But actually, it's probably more dietary pattern. And people that have good dietary patterns tend to be generally healthier. They tend to exercise and sleep better and all that kind of stuff. But the Mediterranean diet is one of the best examples of a whole food, primarily plant-based diet with healthy oils, seafood, and relatively low red meat and minimal processed foods. That combination tends to lengthen telomeres. And so that's really one of the amazing things. I have a colleague, Dr. Dean Ornish. He and I work together on looking at sort of healthy patterns of diets. And we actually found, in fact, that healthy diets like the Mediterranean diets not only actually lengthen telomeres, but also at the same time, again, Mother Nature being very efficient, actually are also anti-angiogenic that can protect you against cancer. So something that's good for the goose is probably good for the gander.
Yes, absolutely.
This is the crux of everything, and most scientists don't talk the way I do. We've had to invent our own vocabulary and metaphors. So DNA, we all are very familiar with. Without DNA that we get from our parents, we're screwed, right? Without the ability to encode proteins and run the cell. It's important, but that information is much more robust than we realize. We think of it as this very fragile chemical. It's actually not fragile. You can boil it. You can find it in fossils. It's pretty strong.
Millions of years. Oh.
Yeah. So this is robust, and it can certainly last 80 years, our lifespan. It can probably last 1,000 years if we're good to it. So what's the other problem? So that you said that's the digital part of the genome or the information. So there's A, T, C, G. Okay, people will remember from high school days if they're not biologists. It's just a digital code encoded in chemicals, 4 of them. And instead of being as ones and zeros, it's just 4 letters. But there's this other type of information that's just as important for our survival, and that's the epigenome. Okay, so what's the epigenome? That's a complex word for the control systems that control the genome in the way that, forgive my anachronism here, but a DVD is the digital information, and the analog is the ability to read that. So the DVD player is analog. So it's moving around and it can move in any possible direction. What does that mean for the cell? Well, what's actually literally happening is that as we develop as embryos, we're spooling out parts of DNA in every cell, differently in every cell. So if you're a nerve cell at this part of the brain that's developing, you'll have this big loop of DNA, and those genes will stay on for most of your life, if not all. But there are parts that you don't want on. You don't want a liver gene on in the brain. So it spools out very tightly, like you would a hose reel, and that keeps these genes off, hopefully for 100 years or more. But what I'm proposing is that insults to the body, and if our body becomes complacent, and there are good things we can do to our bodies, what we lose is that structure, these loops and these tight bundles, and those fall apart. We can see that in our studies, and we can actually measure that, and it's a clock. It's a clock of aging. If we measure those loops and the changes to this epigenome, I can actually tell you how old you are biologically, and I can predict with high accuracy when you're going to die, almost to the month.
Wow, that's nuts.
Scary, right? I
Yeah.
haven't had it done. Would you get your clock done?
I mean, and this is just a little sidebar here, but this brings to mind the science behind telomeres and measuring that as this biological marker. But there's more. There's much
Right.
more to it. That's just one aspect.
Yeah, and what's comforting about this theory, and it's the mark of any decent theory, is that it should be able to explain not just one aspect, but all aspects of a very complex system. And aging is the ultimate complex system.
Yeah.
And we've also got 1,000 years of observation that we have to explain. And if it doesn't explain half of it, throw the theory out. But as I've described in my book, the theory does actually explain everything, even telomere loss. Telomeres are the ends of chromosomes that wear down over time. The epigenome, the proteins that package those loops and those bundles, are also packaging the ends of the chromosomes. And the unraveling leads to an acceleration of that loss as well.
Right.
And actually the factors that stabilize our epigenome, and we work on some of these, they're called sirtuins. We've worked on them for 20 years. We can activate them by being healthy. They are involved in protecting the ends of chromosomes as well and bundling them tightly so they don't erode and cause aging to happen as well.
Yeah. I want to talk about these sirtuins. This is really, really fascinating. So is this under that umbrella of what you're calling longevity genes?
Yes.
Okay. And how many are there?
Well, in total, there's dozens, but they fall into three main categories that we know of. The sirtuins, there are 7 of them in our
And we
bodies.
all have some of them.
Well, you better have all of them or you're dead.
There you go.
They're
Right.
really important. But we have better copies than others. Some people have variants that predispose them to long life. There's one called SIRT6, and if you have your genome, we can have a look to see if you've got the right variant to live a long time. But by the way, only 20% of longevity is genetic. So the good news is that a lot of it's in our hands because it's epigenetic. That's what's great about this theory, is that if I'm right, genes are only a tiny part of the story. But these genes are still important because they protect the epigenome and make sure that DVD is read correctly and doesn't get scratches, so you can read the symphony for longer.
This is so fascinating.
So you mentioned nutrients. First of all, we have a theory that bears out, which is eat foods that are stressed out, which is a weird concept, right? But we do it naturally. We drink, some of us drink red wine, which is a stressed grape before we pick it. We often eat colored foods. So spinach is a dark green food. There's blueberries, which are dark. The whiter ones are not as good. So why is that? Well, stressed food produces a lot of what we call xenohermetic molecules. And I'll explain what that means. It's a terrible word we coined, but xeno, X-E-N-O, means from other species. And hormesis is a very important word. You got to remember the word hormesis because every day you should think about it. Hormesis is what doesn't kill us, makes us live longer. And it's a term that means you've got to get your body out of its complacency. You've got to trigger those defenses, those longevity genes. So xenohermesis is you don't have to only run and eat well at the right times, but you can also get these molecules from the right animals and plants, but particularly plants that are stressed. Because when plants are stressed, they're making these molecules of health for their own benefit, right? They're trying to survive. They're turning on their longevity genes. We forget plants have longevity genes too. So a stressed plant will make these colored molecules to protect from UV and dehydration. When we eat them, they trigger our own body's defenses, and you can get the benefit. So that's nutrition, colored foods, stressed foods. Organic is stressed, right? You don't want the perfect lettuce that's been not put any stress. And we need to do more of that. We need to let our plants stress a little bit before we eat them. And then nutrition. There's a lot in nutrition. Now, there's a debate every week about what's good. What I do is on the part 3 of the book, I list it out. So I truly believe that we've got to mix it up, right? The secret is not so much what we eat, but when we eat. And also what we eat should have variety. So I don't say only eat meat. I don't say only eat carbohydrate. I eat a little bit of everything. I try to avoid big amounts of meat because there's one of these longevity pathways. Remember I said there are 3 main ones. One of them senses how much meat we eat and amino acids. So you need to give it time to rest and settle down. So that's important. So often I'm not eating a big steak, but I will eat meat if I've worked out because our body needs amino acids. But that's it. Make sure that actually what's more important than what you eat is when you eat. How's that for an interesting thing to say? And what we've discovered with my collaborators, and I need to give a shout out to one of my friends at the NIH, National Institutes of Health, Rafael DeCarbo, he studied 10,000 mice. And what he tried to figure out was, is there a diet that makes them live longer? And he mixed combinations of carbohydrate, protein, and fat, and was hoping to see finally what works. And he found out they all did the same thing. They all had short lifespans. But there was one group where he only gave them the food 2 hours a day instead of all throughout the day. And they lived about 20 to 30% longer.
Wow.
Yeah.
Love it. Wow.
So if there's one thing I could say that I've learned after reading 10,000 papers and studying this my whole life, it's eat less often.
That's so good.
So the reason I call my book Aging in Reverse is imagine if we didn't have all that outside noise around aging. Because when I say aging, especially to women, what comes up for them is they don't want to be that, or they feel dated or has been. So people want to fight. Like I need to look 20 forever. I need to look 30 forever. But that doesn't have to be the way. And I'm not saying go accept and age gracefully either. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is it doesn't have to look a certain way. Aging can look like whatever you want it to look like.
Yeah, absolutely.
It could be your powerful years. It could be the years that you get stronger. It could be the years where you learn more, where you become more authentic, where you have more fun. It could be all of those things, but it starts with that shift of like, okay, what am I telling myself about this? What am I deciding? What do I want? And where am I finding evidence to support things? Like if you're finding evidence all day long that, hey, 40s, 50s, 60s is bad, and that's what you keep programming yourself, of course you're going to set yourself up for issues. Absolutely. But when you look for the opposite and you validate that people can be healthy, can be strong, can be vibrant, can do these things, it starts to shift your perspective on that as well.
Oh, so good, so powerful, and so real. And this is something I've been thinking a lot about as well recently, is that we are bombarded with messages of aging is, because of all the examples, and also even the way we've grown up and seeing the aging of our parents, our grandparents. And there are folks who, they are needing assistance in their 50s and 60s, and maybe they're, arthritis so bad they're in a wheelchair or a cane. But then there's also these examples of people who are in their 70s and 80s who are running marathons and competing in Spartan races and, living their best life.
So what are you going to decide to make your norm? Like that's the thing. Look, I hate statistics. I hate when doctors say, well, statistically you have an X% chance to live, or you have % chance of this happening. Like I hate that, because you could be the 1%, you could be the 2%. Like get rid of that and just go for like, where's the evidence of the one that's overcome this? With my leg, with that happening in my back and my leg, I instantly could have said, oh, I can't work out anymore. I'm not going to, this is just what happens. And you know what? No one would have challenged me. I could have enrolled the whole world on why my leg doesn't work and I can't work out anymore and I can't do this and I'm going to do a whole nother career. That could have easily been done. But that is not fully living and aging in reverse. And I interviewed a woman on my podcast, Janine Shepherd, and her story really stuck with me because she was an Olympic athlete. She was training for the Olympics. She was hit by a truck training for the Olympics. Imagine this, totally paralyzed, airlifted to a hospital, told she would never walk again by multiple doctors, told this, every reason to believe that. She refused to listen to it. She found evidence of others that could retrain their brain. And she is a documented walking paraplegic now. A walking paraplegic. Wow. There's been movies about her, all because she decided and refused to let in the noise that wasn't going to happen for her. And when I heard that story, when I interviewed her, when I met her in person, it's like, how can I stay caught up on my leg with that? Like, really, how can I stay caught up on that?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So again, just get this message. We have to tune into different stories,
yes,
and not get caught up on the societal norms and conditions, because the reality is, for centuries prior to this, there was a whole different experience in aging. And people think like, well, we live a lot longer now. that's taking it when we're talking about the average, we're taking into consideration, a lot of people dying a lot younger,
Totally.
due to, not having access to healthcare and, clean processes and this kind of things, infection. But we actually see, if we look at indigenous cultures, folks who are much older,
Yes.
still out kicking it, dancing with the kids, being a contributing part of the society. And today it's just a different story.
And let me tell you, that's a perfect example too. If you look at years ago, somebody had to decide it was possible to live longer, right? That had to happen. I have a vision that 100 years from now, 50 and 60 is not going to be old. Like that will still be young. People will still be having kids then, maybe. That'll still be your youth. Because 100 years ago, it was very different, the life expectancy. 150, 200 years ago, totally different story. So you have to have that vision and that willingness to step out of what you've been told or what you've believed and look at there's another possibility. And here's the thing, right or wrong, you might not agree with me, okay? But right or wrong, what does it hurt to believe that? Like seriously, like if you want to give in to excuses and validating and saying it's not possible and argue with me, great. Is that make your life any better? Because we've just taken away any possibility. If I say, you know what, you're right. Your thyroid, you're this, your metabolism, you're right, it sucks. You're right, your hormones are shot. You're right. You're just going to be overweight now. You're right, you're going to be in pain forever. You're right. Like, what does that do for you? What kind of life is that? That's a life without hope. Like, so to me, validating excuses serves no purpose. It literally serves no purpose. It makes you temporarily feel better in a moment. It does not do anything to help you live a bigger life. And for me, I'm taking a stand for people to have a bigger life because validating excuses is doing a disservice to people.
Yes.
Fitness has been huge for me since I was 12 years old, and growing up watching Hulk Hogan and The Ultimate Warrior and Stallone and Schwarzenegger on the big screen. So I've always been a meathead. And to this day, you look at Arnold, The Rock, they talk about like that's the foundation. Everyone that I know that I look up to that's successful, that's their foundation, that's their anchor. And you can't be your best self if you're not taking care of your body. Like it's just a fact, people, LL, Dr. Dre, they're all doing it. So you get, and now I think when I was younger, when we were younger, people who at 45 seemed like they were old and retired, and you know what I mean? And I think there's still people that believe that, because I get messages sometimes like, oh, I know my best days are behind me. I'm like, what? No, you're just getting started. Like look at Will Smith, look at LL, like they're 50 plus and they're dominating. Yeah. So I think there's been a paradigm shift there for sure. And I don't feel old. I feel like I'm just getting started. But fitness is the thing. That's got to be the foundation. And also, you have to be selfish. I think most of the time you should be selfless and focus on other people, but you have to take care of yourself first. So if I don't get my morning routine in, if I don't get my workouts done, then I can't be my best for you, for everybody that I see. Then I'm behind the 8 ball. Then I'm stressed out and I have anxiety. So you got to take care of yourself. It's the best therapy, I think. So it's always got to be the foundation. And I put it like that because people complicate it too much now with Instagram in 2019. It's like, look, 3 to 5 days a week, lift some heavy stuff, do some basic exercises. You don't have to do all the crazy stuff you see on Instagram, like just basic stuff and just get it done.
Yeah. But in those basics, and even in this very short sentence, you say something that I don't think we talk enough about. It's not just lift, but you said carry. Why carry?
Well, I mean, that's basically the oldest form of strength training, right? It's just picking up heavy stuff and moving it to build shelter. Yeah. Thousands of years ago. So I think there's still value to that, is picking up. I mean, you'll have to do that in real life. Right. Like you're not going to lay down in real life and press a bar like this, but everybody's always going to pick up suitcases, bags, kids, people, whatever, and carry stuff. Yeah. So it's like that's the most functional thing you can do. So farmers walks, Zercher carries, whatever. You should always incorporate that in your weekly program.
You know what's crazy, man? Like it's been probably the last 3 months. And, I told you about my injury. Yeah. But I've been doing carries. Like I'll do that to warm up. Like I'll just nobody else in the gym is doing this. Like I'm just walking around with the heavy kettlebell in one hand or in 2 hands and just walking around, walking back. They're just like, is he putting it somewhere? You know what I'm saying? But I'm just replicating something that we would do normally in life that we should be training for. So
totally, and it strengthens everything from head to toe. Your ankles get stronger, your knee stability, hip stability,
obliques.
Low back, obliques. Yeah. Man. Yeah, actually, that's the single arm one that you're talking about. Your QL muscle, your quadratus lumborum, is one of the muscles that people don't know about that causes a lot of lower back pain. And Dr. Stuart McGill, who's like the leading spine expert on the planet, he says doing those is one of the best things you can do to strengthen that and thus prevent lower back pain.
Yes. So grab a heavy dumbbell or a heavy implement, you know, a heavy kettlebell, whatever it is, and carry one.
Yep.
You know, just pick up, 100 yards or whatever it is. Just walk around your gym. Do that and switch hands, walk back. I think it'll be really helpful for everybody.
Absolutely.
That's great, man. And then also you said drag.
Yeah.
That's another thing we don't really think about.
Right.
But drag heavy things.
Again, going back to building shelter or killing a moose or something and dragging it, like that's one of the oldest forms of strength training. That's what we had to do. And it just builds strength in a more functional way than just, getting in a machine or just doing like I said, a one-arm row or something like that. Yeah. Very functional and great for knee strength too and preventing or rehabbing knee injuries.
Yeah. Man, so good. Another one of these 45 lessons from 45 years is less is more. Less is more. Why'd you put that on there?
I've always been attracted to that. And I think most people, even if they don't think about it, when somebody comes in and simplifies something for you, like if you're like, oh, should I do this, and you have a million options, and somebody's like, dude, those are crazy. Just do this one. You're like, you feel such a sigh of relief. Yeah. So, and some of my favorite books are The One Thing and the 80-20 Principle and Essentialism. I think less is always more. The more you can reduce, that's why Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg and people have a wardrobe that they wear all the time. The more you can reduce options, the more your anxiety and stress goes down. The more you simplify things, the better it's going to be, no matter what it is. That's why I said, like with fitness, everybody goes on Instagram and like, oh, should I do this? It's like, just simplify it. Just do a push, pull, a squat, a hinge. It's pretty simple stuff, So I'm always looking for ways that I could simplify things.
Yeah. One of the things I talked about with Steve Weatherford was he's really been, I think in the last couple of years, shifting more towards eccentric training.
Yeah.
Like just slowing things down. And he feels like he feels that pump in the changes with his muscle and the soreness, but his joints don't hurt.
Yeah.
Like he's not just like hammered like he used to be, but he's still incredibly fit.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just like, but he's doing less exercises, which it's very counterintuitive because we think we should do more. Like we've only worked out for 30 minutes. Like we got to do 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. But the opposite is often true.
Dude, I think it's always true, honestly. I think most people do way too much. If we're talking less is more specific to weight training and strength training, that's how I went from 147 pounds to over 220. That's how I got a lot of similar results with hundreds of people in my gym and online. Is I really like working up to 1 to 2 top end sets on stuff. So like if you're doing a leg day, maybe you work up to 1 heavy set of leg curls and do 1 heavy set of split squats, 1 set of squats, 1 set of RDLs. And where most people are doing, especially these days, they're doing rounds and they're doing 4 or 5 sets. It's like that's a lot of junk volume. I think the main thing that really makes a difference is setting PRs. So if you can do split squats with 35s today for 10, you should be doing 11 next week, and then you should move on to 40s. Over time, if you just get stronger, and an easy way to get stronger is to do less because that way your body's not so beat up, you're going to transform, you're going to feel better, your joints are going to be better.
Yeah. Love that, man. So good.
We went out there every day working hard to be the very best that we could be defensively and the very best that we could be offensively. Now, for me, I always work with weights and stuff in the off season, but being a small guy, never really understood.
That wasn't very popular then.
No, it wasn't.
Well.
No, it wasn't. Because as a shortstop, you wanted to be flexible. You didn't want to be too tight. But I wanted to be stronger. And so in 1985, and I think this is where we were going. In 1985, I had a chance to meet a guy by the name of Mackie Shilstone, who took Michael Spinks from a light heavy to a heavyweight. And it was at that point that things kind of changed for me. 1985, my greatest accomplishment in the game today has been playing with a rotator cuff, a torn rotator cuff from 1985 to 1996. And I didn't get the rotator cuff worked on until after I retired because it was starting to affect my golf game. Talk about priorities. But Mackie, when I met Mackie, I told Mackie that what I wanted to prolong my career. I wanted to be able to play beyond 40. because 40 was the number. You can't play beyond 40. Saying, well, that ain't what I've been taught. You can play as long as you want to play, as long as you keep yourself in good shape and stuff. I said 40, that's nothing. So we started working on protecting the area around the rotator cuff, doing all of the armband exercises, the internal, external, the sword in, sword out. I know all of these exercises now because
Early.
it's those little muscles around the area. And I don't know if you've ever had a rotator cuff tear or strain or whatever. That little muscle does so much for everything that you do in your life. Opening the car door, turning the radio dial, you name it. And so what I had to do is I had to work from below the shoulder. But what happens when you lose one instinct, another one takes over. So I was already pretty quick and accurate, and it just enhanced that even more. But from 85 to 96, I was still able to win Gold Gloves, not being able to get up on top. So I say to guys, it's easy to play when you're healthy. It's easy to play when you're healthy. It's show me that guy who can go out there and still get it done when he's ailing every day. If you show me a player that goes to a coach and says, Coach, I'm 100%. I'm going to show you somebody who's not giving 100. Because if you're giving 100 every day, there's no way that you go out there and you don't have some type of ache of pain. Be it your knee, your foot, something has to be aching you. So the guys that excel at it and become greats or that are out there every day, and I know that winning is much more than getting a big hit or making a great play. Winning is being able to help my team psychologically. My being there at 80%, sometimes for a team is going to be better than somebody else at 100. Psychologically. And so I tell young people all the time that, when you're one of the people that the team depends on, you got to show up, man. You got to figure out a way to get it done. And just the intimidating factor sometimes when you can intimidate a team by saying that, well, I'm not going to hit it to you. When a guy would say to me, well, I ain't going to hit it to you today, I got him.
Yep.
I got him.
Before it even starts.
Before it starts. And that's the type of edge that you're looking for.
If you think you're just human, then life is not so much fun. But when you know there's this eternal part of us, then life becomes a very different thing. So you stop being influenced by so-called cultural portals. So here's a cultural portal. I'm in having my hair done, and my hairdresser was 29, and her friends all say to her, what are you going to do next year? Like, whoa, the big 3-0 is like that means anything. Or, the retirement age of 65. That was chosen by Otto von Bismarck in Germany in 1880 so that the pensioners could have a little rest before they died. At that time, the life expectancy was 18 months after age 65. It's now 24 years. Whoa. So when people associate age 65 with retirement, meaning no longer useful, then there is a tendency to internalize that and teach your biology that means you're irrelevant. When in fact, many people are just getting started in their 60s. See, growing older, in the words of Mario Martinez, is the opportunity to increase your value and competence.
Love that.
We got a guy here in Portland, Maine, who runs Gateway Studio, Bob Ludwig. I don't know how many Grammys this guy has got, but he's well over 60, and he's got a golden ear, which just gets better.
Wow, that's so powerful.
I spent a lot of time thinking about this phenomenon that we all see around us. As sports fans, we see all of our favorite athletes just hanging around longer, hanging around, having the peaks of their careers later and later. People like...
This is new.
Absolutely. I mean, new, because you hear them talking about it every time you watch sports now. They're saying, no one's ever won a major tennis tournament at the age of Roger Federer. No one's ever played more minutes, in the NBA at this level like LeBron James. Whatever sport it is, they're talking about these people who are, 35, 38, 40, Tom Brady. setting new records. And I said, what's going on here that all of these people can compete so many levels above what I'm trying to do, and they're healthy and they're performing their best? What are they doing that I'm not doing, and what actually makes a difference?
So one of the most fascinating things, I want to dive into some of these reasons why folks are able to, have longer careers, and what we need to look at, like some of the things that's going on behind the scenes that might rob us of that. And you shared in the book that, because we tend to think it's because of loss of muscle, for example, we're losing strength as you get older. But you say it's not a loss of strength, it's a loss of power is one of the issues. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, power is the ability to generate force in a short period of time. So if you think if you can lift up a 100-pound barbell, that takes strength. But to kind of explosively throw a 100-pound barbell, that would be power. That's the difference. It's someone demonstrated it for me. Like, it's the difference between, he said, tap your finger on your chest and now take it and pull it back and go like that. That's power. And you lose power because you have these quick twitch muscle fibers and slow twitch muscle fibers, and they as you age, your muscle fibers don't reproduce as well. They die off, basically, your motor units, but they die off at different rates. The quick twitch ones don't age as well, basically. And there's different possible reasons for that, but the result is that athletes in power sports, that involve kind of sprinting or hitting a baseball, anything like that, they tend to have earlier career peaks than athletes in endurance sports like marathoning or distance swimming, things like that.
Right. That's so fascinating. And so one of the things we need to possibly look at is training for power, I would assume. So do we have some examples of folks who are doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, somebody that I talked to, for instance, there's John Wellborn, who runs a company called Power Athlete. He's a former. He was in the NFL for 10 years as a lineman, and now he's as an offensive lineman, and now he's basically like a power coach guru. This is his whole thing, and a lot of the training methods and technologies that I talked about and that I researched in the course of writing this book have to do with maintaining that power. I mean, in some ways, it's the key to having the sort of physiology and strength profile of a younger athlete.
Yeah. So I want to talk about exercise, just general. This is in many ways kind of considered this virtual fountain of youth. So from your experience and the things that you've learned, how important is us, just if we're talking about being able to be functional as we get older, what role does exercise play for us?
Oh, it's everything. Exercise is, I think it's increasingly being recognized as the key to healthy aging. I mean, everything from just kind of maintaining strength and mobility as you age, to avoid things like falls. Once you are in your 70s and 80s and may have some osteoporosis. I mean, that's a significant cause of death for people in that age group. But the amazing thing about exercise is it really does trigger in the body the mechanisms that reproduce. I mean, physiologically, exercise is youth. It resets gene expression in a way that causes your hormone production, your other blood factors to be indistinguishable from those of a young person. I mean, right. When they look at something called your fitness age, somebody who is very fit in their 50s can have the exact same biomarkers and the same life expectancy as a healthy person in their 20s.
Right. It's crazy and amazing. And you just said it. It's just how exercise is just one of those things. I think it really makes us human. It's a part of being human. Your genes expect you to move. And if we're neglecting that, then, man, we set in place the opposite, this kind of accelerating aging process.
Yeah, I mean, and this is something where your genes expect you to move is a great way to put it, because we are just starting to understand like the epigenetics, basically, right. Like all the stuff that goes on with gene expression and protein formation in your cells.
Talk about gray matter as well.
And gray matter, and they don't even know why, but basically, yeah, it turns out that exercise, especially intense exercise, is as far as preserving your volume of gray matter in your brain, basically the stuff that makes you human. Exercise is just as effective as things like playing chess or playing bridge or doing crossword puzzles. We understand, it makes intuitive sense why using your brain for advanced cognition, use it or lose it, why it helps you preserve that matter. But we don't totally understand why exercise has the same effect, but it does.
Yeah, man. And by the way, so the gray matter, this is part of the central nervous system, glial cells, neuronal cell bodies, synapses, the synaptic clefts, all this connection. There's so much going on with gray matter, and you develop more support your gray matter and not losing it by exercising. So please make this a call to action, that no matter what, we're getting some movement in, not just for the physical benefits, because a lot of times we exercise because we're trying to get sexy. But that's kind of a side effect. It's not the main objective. The main objective is keeping our brains young and keeping our bodies, like you said, those biomarkers significantly younger just by getting into movement.
Stress is, devastating throughout the body for a lot of reasons. And it's almost, if you looked at lifestyle factors and reasons that people get sick, bad diet is right here. Stress is like right below that. And the inability to manage stress is a huge component of it's the what we call the etiology of disease. Mm-hmm. So you can talk about the stress component of some autoimmune diseases. You can talk about the stress component of type 2 diabetes. You can talk about the stress component of obesity in general and metabolic syndrome. What happens under most conditions of stress, and by the way, stress is not generally a bad thing. I mean, you build muscle as a result of stress that you incur in the gym.
Hormetic
but
stress,
these are hormetic stressors. These are acute stressors that, when controlled, actually cause the body to respond positively. But and the best example I'll give you is that when I was a runner, the occasional hormetic stress was going to be contemplated to make me better at what I was doing, but doing it the same thing day in and day out, 15, 20 miles a day every day, ultimately destroyed me, because all it did was accumulate damage. It was an accumulation of stress. So when we talk about what happens to the body under stress, the biochemistry of it is that there's a signal sent from the brain to the adrenal glands to secrete hormones. Adrenaline, norepinephrine, epinephrine are the common ones that we think about. But cortisol is this sort of long-term stress response that has interesting consequences. So when you're under stress, the body secretes cortisol. Cortisol tears down muscle tissue, first of all, so that the amino acids in the muscle can be sent to the liver to be made into glucose. So the brain can have more glucose and the muscles can have more glucose to run fast. It basically shuts down a lot of bodily functions. So cortisol suppresses the immune system. Cortisol, from the perspective of evolution, would be like, okay, why would I invest in resources that might save me in a year or two with an immune system when I might not live the next hour or two? Cortisol basically shuts down a lot of reproductive processes. Again, the body goes, well, why would I invest in reproduction when I might not even live the next couple of hours? So cortisol decreases the uptake of calcium by bones. Again, you want to divert the calcium to the electrical channels that are causing nerves to fire and hearts to beat, rather than building a structure that, again, will have no use if I don't survive the next couple of hours. So cortisol has all of these sort of consequences that make sense in terms of a short-term event, like I'm being chased down the plains of Africa by a saber-toothed tiger. I got to survive the next 2 hours, and if it takes me a couple of days or weeks to repair the short-term damage, to improve the uptake of calcium by bones, to reset my immune system back to where it should be, then so be it. I just need to survive the short term. So that makes sense in the context of like these occasional traumatic stressors. Now, fast forward to modern times. Oh my God, the bills due, the mortgage payments due, the noisy neighbors next door, the traffic on the way to work. Oh boy, all of these things that we take on as stress. My relationship isn't where it needs to be. I'm worried about the kids. Are they gonna? We all find ways in which to generate this same signal in our brain that causes the same secretion of chemicals that has the same devastating effect, except now it's not just once in a while.
It's chronic.
It's chronic, it's all the time. So one of the effects of cortisol is that it encourages the deposition of fat. And it also encourages what we call gluconeogenesis, the manufacturing of glucose by the liver. So if you're trying to burn off fat, and yet you've got these stress hormones that are causing you to make more sugar in your liver, and also causing you to want to retain the body fat that you already have and not take it out of storage and burn it, those two things don't jibe.
Yeah.
They don't go together. So we need to figure out ways to reduce stress.
Not having a sense of purpose in your life is associated with much poorer health outcomes across multiple conditions. It's associated with much less happiness, lower income levels. So many things are associated with not having a sense of purpose in our lives. And I feel that fundamentally a life which has no meaning and purpose in it is inherently a stressful life, right? We can talk about all the other things, but actually not having a reason to get up in the morning, not actually knowing where you're going with your life, I think it's incredibly stressful. Now, I appreciate that even simply saying that can sound stressful to someone if they're hearing that and they're going, yeah, okay, fine, but I don't like my job. I don't like where I live. What can I do about that? And so why I started the book with this, because I think it is probably one of the most important things. And yes, of course, breathing, exercise, meditation, nature, all those things are important, and I cover them all and I give practical tips in them. But I think the meaning and purpose piece is probably the most important. And I think it's one of the freshest. It's a new idea for people to latch onto. And so, Shawn, a few years ago, I came across this Japanese concept, ikigai. Have you come across it before?
I haven't.
I was on Facebook, and one of my friends posted, they said that these 4 circles, right? These 4 different circles, and where they intersect in the middle is your ikigai. It's how the Japanese live. It's the way of living your life so you have meaning and purpose. And the 4 things are this. You need to find one thing in your life that you're good at, that pays you money, that you love, and that the world needs. And I thought, okay, that looks great. I like that. I would like a bit of ikigai in my life, right? But then I would use this concept with my patients, and I talked to them about this. And for many of them, they just found it too intimidating. They found, yeah, man, that sounds great, but how am I going to get there, right? And actually, on the UK book tour back in January, I remember I gave a big talk in London, and at the Q&A at the end, a Japanese student put her hand up, and she said, Dr. Chatterjee, look, I'm very familiar with Ikigai. It's part of my culture. But I found it very stressful my whole life. It's an impossible ideal for me to live up to. Do you see what I mean? It's great if you can get it, but many of us don't feel we can. Yeah. And so I created a new framework in the book called the Live Framework to help people start to find meaning and purpose. It's like called the Live Framework, L-I-V-E, L for love, I for intention, V for vision, and E for engagements. Now, we don't necessarily need to go into the whole thing, but I think the first one is super, super interesting for people. And I think it will really shed some light onto their lives. L is for love, right? So that is about passion. So the research tells us this, Shawn. It tells us that regularly doing things that we love makes us more resilient to stress.
Yeah.
But conversely, being chronically stressed makes it really hard for us to experience pleasure in day-to-day things. So it works both ways. Yeah. So passion is a huge part of meaning and purpose. It's a huge part of stress. It's a huge part of health. I had a patient maybe a year ago, 52-year-old chap, right? He was the CFO of a plastics company local to me. And he came in to see me. And he was married, he had 2 kids, he had a good job, he was living in a pretty decent house. From the outside, his life was good. But he came in to see me, he said, Dr. Chatterjee, look, some days I kind of struggle to get out of bed in the morning. My motivation's down a little bit. I feel a bit flat about things. Is this what depression is? And so we were chatting. I started to try and understand what was going on in his life. I ran some tests, some bloods. They were all normal. And I said, look, how's your job? Your job's okay. I mean, I don't really enjoy it, but I've got to do it. I've got a mortgage. I've got a family to feed. That's why I do my job. I said, okay, how's your marriage? yeah, so. I don't really see my wife that much. Yeah, I guess it's okay. Very, very indifferent. And I said, have you got any hobbies? What do you do in the week that you enjoy? He said, I don't really have any hobbies. I'm too busy. I said, what about the weekends? Weekends, I've got to do all the household chores. I've got to take the kids to their sports classes. I don't have time, Doc, for hobbies. I said, okay, did you ever have a hobby? Yeah, like as a kid, as a teenager, I used to love train sets. I said, okay, have you got a train set at home? Yeah, I've got one in the attic, but I haven't seen it in years. It's probably dusty and got cobwebs on it. I said, look, what I'd love you to do when you get home tonight is get your train set out. Now, I fully appreciate it's probably not the advice he was expecting from his doctor, but that's the advice I gave to him. Anyway, I didn't see him for a few weeks, right? And that's not uncommon. We have so many patients, we can't follow everybody up. But 3 months later, I just finished my morning clinic. I was in the car park about to do some home visits for the elderly patients who can't come into the practice. And I bumped into his wife. I said, hey, look, how's your husband getting on? She said, oh man, Dr. Chassie, I just want to say thank you. I feel like I've got the guy I married back again. He comes home from work, he plays on his train set, he's on eBay buying collector's items, and he's subscribed to some monthly magazine now. I thought, okay, that's great. I felt really good. I still hadn't seen him. 3 months later, I was looking at my clinic list, and his name's on it. He had done some blood tests, and he was coming in to see me for the results. So I said, hey, how are you getting on compared to 6 months ago? He said, Doc, I feel like a different person. Life is good. I've got energy. I feel motivated and I'm concentrating much better. I said, okay, great. How's your job? My job, I love it now. I'm really getting a lot out of my job. How's your relationship with your wife? So good. It's the best it's been for years. So Shawn, I'm going to ask you a question. Did that man have a mental health problem? I mean, he certainly had symptoms that would be consistent with a mental health problem. I could have diagnosed him with something like depression, potentially. Yeah. But it's not what he really had, a deficiency of passion in his life. And when we corrected his passion deficiency, not only does he feel better in himself, now that the job that he didn't like so much, he's enjoying and getting more out of, now his relationship's starting to improve. And this is why I'm so passionate about passion, right? We talk about health. We talk about the amount of vegetables we're eating. We're talking about the workouts we do or don't do. And of course, that's important. But I want people to give passion the same priority as they will give to the number of vegetables they have on their plate, right? It is so important. So the prescription I give to people is, can you give yourself a dose of pleasure every day? Even if it's just for 5 minutes. It could be reading a book, going for a walk, listening to a podcast, right? It could be, coming home from work, putting on your computer, going on YouTube, finding your favorite comedian and laughing for 5 minutes. I don't care what it is, but that's my challenge to everybody listening to this podcast. Can you give yourself 5 minutes of pleasure and passion every day? And the second request I'd make of the audience, I know it's your audience, but if you don't mind, my request I'd make of them is, have a think. When was the last time you did something in your life that you really, really love? Something you did not just to post on social media, but something you did because it makes you feel good. If it's not been for a while, that's okay. But I would suggest today at some point, you look at your calendar, you make some calls, and you schedule it into your diary. Passion is important for your health. It's as important, I would argue, as any other component of your health.
Absolutely. Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here to up-level your health today. So every habit begins with a psychological pattern called a habit loop, right? A habit loop.
Makes sense.
And it's a 3-part process. First, there's a cue or a trigger that tells your brain to go in automatic mode and let a behavior unfold. And